People who have been on reality TV shows, what's rigged and what's not. My friend was on What Not to Wear, and I was in the audience of people who were there to react when she came out from behind the curtain with her new look. She came out over and over again, but our cheering was never enthusiastic enough for the producers. After about 10 takes, we were screaming our heads off, totally hysterical, as if we'd just seen her rise from the dead. So that part was fake. I thought she just looked all right.
Sounds like a wild experience. It's funny how they really crank up the hype for the show. I guess the producers want that big reaction every time. Your friend probably just wanted to feel good about herself, while you all had to fake the energy. It's cool that you supported her though. But yeah, sometimes it feels staged when it's all about the reaction, not the actual change.
Sob stories on singing shows, it's not the contestant's fault. I made it through a few rounds for a well-known singing show, and they BG you for sob stories. On my very first application form, I was asked about the most difficult moment in my life, what obstacles I'd overcome to be there, had I ever experienced bullying, etc. They pretty much make you tell them a sob story. So I wrote all about my heartbreak when I ran out of coffee.
It's interesting how those shows work. They really do want you to dive into your life, even if it means stretching the truth a bit. I get why they do it though, drama sells. I remember a friend of mine caught up in a similar situation. He had to talk about struggles that were a bit exaggerated just to get airtime. It's all part of the game, I guess.
My cousin was on a Toronto dating show called Matchmaker many years ago. She said it was completely scripted and she met her blind date before filming so the producers could go over the script with them. They were given a list of ridiculous and racy questions to ask each other and encouraged to make out if they actually liked each other, or to cause a scene and be dramatic if they didn't really click.
That sounds like a wild experience for your cousin. It's interesting how these dating shows work behind the scenes. I've heard similar things from friends who tried out for reality TV. It's all about drama and entertainment, not really about finding genuine connections. The scripted element makes it feel less authentic, but I guess that's what keeps viewers engaged.
Some friends of mine went on Cash Cab. One guy was chosen the day before and told to come with up to 4 friends to a certain spot the next afternoon. They met a producer who hailed the cab and were told they were going to game show. They had to reshoot getting into the cab because my one friend said something like, "What are the chances? We're on our way to another game show."
That's pretty cool. It must have been a fun surprise for them, just getting into a cab and finding out they were part of a show. Reshooting that bit probably added some pressure but also some laughs. It's always interesting to see how these behind-the-scenes moments can change the vibe. I can only imagine the excitement they felt once they realized it wasn't just a regular ride.
I have worked on several reality shows. Some are more fake than others, but they are all heavily scheduled and formatted, never spontaneous. I worked on a certain MTV dating show where one of the contestants tried to escape the house in the middle of the night, and one of the production assistants had to tackle him in the front yard and drag him back into the house. It's like prison. They're completely cut out from the outside world. No computer, books, phones, watches, and they are fed mostly booze. They all go insane. Also, if the show doesn't air, they don't win their prize money. This is a standard for all competition reality shows.
That sounds pretty wild. I can imagine how intense it gets when people are cut off from the outside. In a way, it's like they're putting their lives on hold for some cash and fame. I remember a buddy of mine once tried to sneak off a shoot early too, but it didn't involve tackling. It's interesting how these shows manipulate situations to create drama. Just makes you think about the lengths people go for a moment in the spotlight.
I have a friend who signed up to audition for a show that she thought was The Bachelorette or something similar. I guess it's standard practice to not give the actual name of the show and just say, "We need good-looking, energetic young women for blah, blah, blah. So she got called back, went through a few different interviews and a screen test. Finally, they tell her that the concept is that she will be running a pawn shop with another woman. She is a dental assistant with no experience remotely related to the pawn business. Pawn Queens ended up being on for 2 seasons, and they gave her a backstory about why she got interested in the pawn business. Not exactly shocking, but it was pretty interesting to see that they basically looked for hot girls first, then put them into a proven concept, Pawn Stars type reality show.
That's a funny twist. Your friend must have been confused at first, thinking she was aiming for love, but ended up in the pawn business instead. It's interesting how reality shows often pick people based on looks rather than experience. I wonder if she enjoyed her time on the show despite the unexpected role. It's kind of cool that she got to be part of something for 2 seasons, even if it wasn't what she signed up for.
Was on an episode of MTV Made. It wasn't super scripted, but certain things were added to make the kids look stupid. On our episode, the producers had sock stuffed inside a kid's drums to make them sound bad, even though the kid didn't actually do that. Stuff like that, but the scripts had room for ad-libs, and the show was fine with that as long as nobody said anything too crazy or suggested anything they couldn't deliver on. Unfortunately, a lot of the kids on the show go back to how they were before almost immediately after filming. People can totally be who they want to be, but why apply to the show? And also, it kind of sucks when the show drops a fuck ton of money on you. Our episode involved paying for an appearance from Finger 11 when they were huge, and it ends up being a waste for everything other than getting a TV episode out of it.
That sounds like a wild experience. It's interesting how reality shows mix real moments with scripted elements. The whole sock in the drum thing just to create drama is kind of funny in a messed up way. I get why kids would want to be on a show like that, but it's a shame when it doesn't help them afterward. Getting a big band like Finger 11 must have felt like a big deal, though. Too bad it didn't lead to more.
I was on a show geared towards preteens and teenagers that tried to imitate Fear Factor on YTV. They had us compete in various unique athletic competitions and other things. Most of it was surprisingly real. We actually did compete. Our scores were based on our performance in the task. The one thing that wasn't real was that the episode made it look like everything happened in a day, when in reality, it took about 5 days to film. Overall, it was a really cool experience that I wouldn't trade for the world.
That sounds like a wild time. Competing in athletic challenges for a show like that seems intense, especially for preteens. The fact that they made it look like it all happened in one day is interesting, though. I guess they just wanted to keep it fast-paced for the viewers. It's nice to hear you had a good experience. Those kinds of memories stick with you.
A friend of mine worked as an art director on the American version of Super Nanny. She said pretty much everything was real, maybe editing together to make it a bit more dramatic, but the family interactions were genuine. And she said Jo Frost is a very sweet, warm woman who really does her best for the kids.
That's interesting. It's cool how reality TV can sometimes be more real than we think. It must have been nice for her to work with someone like Jo Frost, who genuinely seems to care about helping families. I guess people often forget that the drama is usually just a bit of editing, but the connections and struggles are real. Sounds like a rewarding experience for her.
In the very first episode of Top Chef they ever filmed, Tom Colicchio flipped out because the dishes the contestants had cooked were getting cold while the film crew took food porn shots of him. From then on, all the contestants have to prepare 2 dishes. One for the judges to sample, and one for the cameras to pan over and show the audience.
That moment on Top Chef really set the tone for the competition. It's wild how important timing is in cooking. I remember a buddy of mine tried to plate a dish perfectly for a photo, but it got cold before he could serve it. He learned quickly that looks aren't everything. Now, he always keeps extra plates ready, just like the show. It's all about getting that balance right.
I'm late, but whatever. Pit bulls and parolees on Animal Planet. I used to work at the main warehouse where they filmed everything. Not sure if I'm actually on the show at all, but if I'm just in the background scratching my ass. Everyone that works there only tolerates filming because it's more money for the dogs. The camera crews would try and get people to recreate things they missed, but most of us weren't very cooperative. Everyone on the show and in the rest of the staff really just wants the best for the dogs. From what I have seen, anything that was staged were things that had actually happened and the camera crew wasn't around for. The dogs there are amazing. All the horrible things they had been through, and they remain so lovable. I miss all my furry buddies there.
Sounds like you had a pretty chill time at the warehouse. Working behind the scenes of a show like that must have been interesting, even if you were just in the background. It's cool that everyone cared more about the dogs than the drama. Those dogs really do have a way of sticking with you. I get why you'd miss them. They go through a lot and still just want to be loved.
Not quite a reality show, but my girlfriend worked on a comedy panel show here in the UK called Celebrity Juice. She expected everything to be scripted and choreographed, but was actually shocked at the amount of improvised humor on set. Jimmy Carr was the special guest. She said he was by far the most naturally funny man she had been in the company of, apart from me, of course. She's not usually a massive fan of his, so I guess that's a testament to his quick wit.
That's cool. Sounds like your girlfriend had a unique experience. It's interesting how things can be different from what you expect, especially in a comedy setting. Improv can really bring out the best in humor. And getting to see someone like Jimmy Carr in action must have been fun, especially since he made an impression on her. It's nice that she could appreciate his talent, even if she's not usually a fan.
Every single thing is fake. I was on a cake competition show. The judges recorded 2 takes for every comment, 1 positive and 1 negative, so the editors could put it together however they wanted. They rolled the clock back an hour, so everyone else could finish. We had over 3 months to plan our spontaneous cake. Oh yeah, and while we won by the judges' vote, a producer decided one of the other cakes would film better for the big reveal, so we didn't win even though we should have.
That sounds like a wild experience. Competitions can be pretty staged, and it's crazy how they manipulate the narrative. It's frustrating when all your hard work doesn't get recognized. It takes away from the excitement when you realize everything's set up to create drama. Even winning doesn't really mean much if it's just for show. Definitely makes you rethink those reality competition shows.
Not surprising, ghost hunting shows are fake. What's surprising is how they do it. See those fancy instruments they carry that no one has ever heard of? They're actually remotes to each other. All you gotta do is split into 2 groups, and when one team is adjusting their settings, the other team is detecting ghosts. So simple, and you get twice the footage. Edit. Also, one time in a screening when the hunters were reviewing evidence, a producer whispered to me, "See that ghost shape behind the door? Yeah, that's the sound guy."
That's wild, honestly. Makes you think about all those hours spent watching those shows, searching for something real. It's funny how they pull off the tricks, though. Using remotes to create the whole ghost hunting vibe? That takes a bit of creativity. And the sound guy being mistaken for a ghost just shows how easy it is to miss the obvious when you're focused on the spectacle. You wonder how many other secrets are hidden behind the lens.
I heard from a tattoo artist that he had auditioned to be on Ink Master in Met K Kuda Season 2, and he explained that to be part of the show, they look for personality traits and Flanderize the hell out of you to make a character that can create drama to the show. K Kuda did actually have a criminal record, so they used that to make him the bully of that season. The tattoo artist who I was talking with claimed K is actually a really cool and nice guy.
It's interesting how reality shows work. The tattoo artist I spoke to had a pretty clear take on it. He said they often exaggerate people's personalities just for drama. He met Keikuta from Ink Master, who seemed nice despite being portrayed as the tough guy. It makes you wonder how much of what we see is real and how much is just for ratings. It's a whole different vibe behind the scenes.
I'm tour guide in the mountains here in Canada, and we currently have a program being filmed in town. Essentially, the idea is that 12 random people all have to run different areas of a hostel. Kitchen, laundry, entertainment, etc. Anyway, on each of the episodes, the staff all go out and do something around the town, be it a bar or in my case, on a 4x4 tour. I was leading the tour for their safety, but they brought in some macho guy with ripped camo pants to be the on-screen guide, while I was about 20 meters ahead leading him. After that, we were made to stop because the producers decided it was time for a dramatic scene. I think one of the guys was to say something offensive to one of the girls, and she was to throw a drink in his face. We were there for about 40 minutes while this poor, gelled-up guy had a bottle of water filled up, thrown in his face, dry off, filled up, and repeat. Good times.
Sounds like an interesting day at work. You're out in the mountains, trying to keep everyone safe, and then, suddenly, it turns into a reality show scene. That macho guy must have felt pretty silly after all those takes. It's wild how much time they spend on one dramatic moment when you're just trying to do your job. It's a bit chaotic, but it probably made for a memorable experience.
I won Food Network Star Season 7 fair and square. No shenanigans whatsoever. Maybe a little creative nudging during the narrative interviews to create a cleaner story, but nothing that changed the course of the competition. Every cooking competition was legit. If you made bad food or presented poorly, you got called on it and eventually went home if you kept repeating these mistakes. I fortunately made fewer mistakes, so I did not go home.
It's interesting how reality shows work behind the scenes. There's often a lot more going on than what viewers see. It sounds like you navigated it well, focusing on your cooking skills while adjusting the narrative to fit. Winning like that can feel rewarding, knowing you put in the effort and got recognized for it. It's a unique experience, competing and showcasing your talent on such a big platform.
I worked on the Sing-Off and ABDC for several seasons in the contestant department. The performances and the performers were all real and really cool. I listened to Street Corner Rehearse Creep on stage one day and got goosebumps from how good they were. There are decisions made by producers to increase the market value of the show, like keeping a fourth group until the final round because they didn't want to lose a key demographic from the audience. The finale was always live and based on fan vote online, so that part was real. One season of ABDC, a contestant broke his leg. That was also sadly real as I was there to witness call 911, the producers and my manager. They were concerned about getting B-roll of him going into the ambulance. He was a really sweet kid, but these shows are exceptions in the industry, not the rule, and both have been canceled.
That sounds like a wild experience. It's interesting to see how real the performances can feel, especially when you get those moments that stick with you. The decision-making behind the scenes is something most people wouldn't think about. And seeing someone get hurt like that must have been tough. It's weird how the show must go on, even in those moments. It's a different world for sure.
Went to a filming of American Ninja Warrior. They filmed all night with over 100 competitors, running the course back-to-back for around 7 hours. The only ones cheering like on the show were family members on sideline. Everyone else was kind of quietly observing. It was impossible to figure out who would make the show and who ended up on the cutting room floor. After watching the actual show on air, even completing the course didn't guarantee that your run would be shown. Several got, over the break so-and-so, made it to the end of the course, CUE 2-second cut a button press. The best bet to making it on air, outside of their stable of famous ninjas, was to fail on the course in a way that nobody else had.
Sounds like a long night. Watching those competitors go through the course back-to-back must have been intense. It's interesting how much effort goes in, and then only a few get their runs aired. Being memorable seems to be the key, even if that means failing in a unique way. I guess it's all about standing out, whether you make it to the end or not.
A friend of mine was on Cupcake Wars. His team actually came first. He said that the ingredients were partially random. The studio sent his team a list of 5 or so different ingredients that were potentials, and then 3 different themes. He had a plan for every single ingredient and theme if needed them.
That's cool. Cupcake Wars seems intense. It's wild that they get random ingredients and themes. Having a plan for all of them shows a lot of preparation. I wonder how they all pick their flavors and designs under pressure. Must have been fun to compete and come out on top. Winning must have felt great for him and his team.
Britain's Got Talent. There are several hidden rounds with producers before you get to the main stage with the judges. My cousin is a very talented musician and got to the last round before the auditions, but they said he didn't have the right image. They select the most watchable acts and usually try and avoid any act that's too professional in case they bow out and get a recording contract outside of the show's format. This is just concerning musicians, at least. So not fake as such, but slanted.
That's interesting. I've heard similar stories about talent shows. It's tough when genuine talent doesn't fit the show's mold. My friend tried out for a singing competition and faced a similar issue. The judges liked her voice but thought she didn't have the right vibe. It can be frustrating. Talent alone doesn't guarantee a spot. Sometimes, it's all about the image they want to project. Just part of the game, I guess.
I briefly appeared in an episode of Airport 24/7, Miami. My appearance was basically me doing my job the same way I would without cameras rolling. The same was true of the stars of the show, since it wasn't like a traditional reality show where they need to create a conflict. The airport does that organically. They got really lucky that some particularly notable event happened while they were filming, like when the fuel farm caught fire/exploded, or when 2 aircraft collided on the taxiway. Everything they showed on the show actually happened, but editing did make some events seem more dramatic.
That sounds pretty interesting. I've never been in a show, but I did once have a job where something wild happened. Just a normal day at work, then all of a sudden, there was a power outage. It made everything so chaotic for a bit. Not quite like your airport story, but still, you never know what's going to happen in a regular day. Life can throw unexpected moments your way.
I had cousins on Extreme Home Makeover about 10 years ago. Everything is pretty much real. They built an entire house in about 4 days. They had prefab pieces for the roof trusses, but everything else was built in the spot. They still live in the house, and only had a few issues. When you build a house so fast, there are bound to be problems. It was a 10 out of 10 experience for them, and I was happy to see it work from the inside out.
That sounds pretty cool. Having cousins on a show like that must have been interesting. Building a house so fast seems risky, but it's nice to hear they still enjoy living there. Those kinds of projects always come with their share of problems, but it's good they had a positive experience overall. Makes you appreciate how much goes into home building. Glad to hear it worked out for them.
Catfish is a semi-real. The production team call up everyone involved beforehand, do the research, etc., as nobody wants to fly halfway across the US to a dead end. Nev and Max aren't informed of any info the production team find, though. They have to find it out themselves, so all their reactions are genuine. I think once in a while the producers have swapped the catfish/hopefuls around when they want a good story, but overall it's surprisingly unscripted.
It's interesting how they keep the reactions genuine. My friend was on a similar show, and they had to dig up all the info themselves. It felt real when they realized someone they thought was a friend wasn't who they said. The production team had done their homework, but the cast was still left in the dark. It made for some intense moments. Guess that's how you keep the audience engaged.
Mine was on an old HGTV show called House Swap. Basically, HGTV brings in two interior decorators, and they go nuts for 24 hours on a single room in each other's house. Not 10 minutes into the episode, and my aunt is arguing with the decorator because she wants to go all earthy, brown, orange, green, etc., and my aunt is just deadpan no. She hates that. Inevitably, the decorator got her way, and they decorated the room in the earthy colors. Come time for the big reveal, and the neighbor hates the colors.
That sounds like a classic reality show moment. It's always interesting to see how different people's tastes clash, especially when it's on TV. Your aunt stands her ground, but then the decorator takes over. It's funny how the neighbor's reaction is a total contrast to all the effort put in. Definitely adds some drama to the reveal. Makes you wonder if they consider that during the process.
My family runs a bunch of storage facilities in Southern California, which is where they film the majority of shows like Storage Wars and Auction Hunters. The first year or so was all real, but then we were getting 50 to 100 people showing up at all our auctions to try and be on TV. Auctions on storage units in Cali have to be publicly announced in the paper a week or so before the auction happens, so people would see that and know when and where to go. It became such a freaking disaster, and people bidding hundreds of dollars on units where there was nothing in them, that it became a problem for the people running the shows, too. They ended up having to stage the auctions and hiding expensive antiques in the units. If you look at the background folk in a lot of the auctions, it's often the same people, aka me and some of my family members, other storage staff members, and friends of people who worked on the show.
That's interesting. Your family made a connection to those reality shows. I can see how it went from a genuine auction vibe to being kind of staged. People showing up just for the chance to be on TV changes the whole experience. It's wild how some folks end up bidding high on empty units, all for the drama. Makes you wonder what the real value is in those finds anyway.
It's not a reality show per se, but my sister's friend was on Jerry Springer. She got on by being friends with a producer, but it was 100% scripted. The story was fake. Her boyfriend was on a show with her, but he was supposedly cheating on her with a woman he'd never met. They told him to act like he really cheated, and he had to try to justify it.
That's interesting. I always thought shows like that were more spontaneous. Sounds like they put a lot of effort into making it look real. I can see how being friends with someone in the industry would give you an edge. It's wild how people can just play roles like that. Makes you wonder how many other stories on those types of shows are just as scripted.
A friend of my friend was on a Dutch show called Barbie and Michael, where they visited her hair salon. Before they actually came, producers came in to check everything out, make sure all the advertisement were removed, and they were told how to react, etc. It wasn't completely staged, but it looked so fake that Barbie and Michael spontaneously came in like they were just visiting. In reality, it was already planned that they would go there and the camera team was already inside. I think this counts for many reality shows, though.
Yeah, that kind of stuff happens a lot on reality shows. It's funny how they try to make it seem natural, but behind the scenes, it's all set up. The producers really control everything, right down to how people should act. It's like they think the audience won't notice. This friend of a friend probably had a wild experience thinking it was more real than it was. Kinda makes you question what's actually genuine on these shows.
I auditioned for American Idol at Gillette Stadium a few years ago. Not sure if it qualifies as rigged, but there are a handful of stages before anyone sees the judges. These stages are judged by producers who often don't even listen to the person singing. Two kinds of people make it, though. the people who dress up like idiots, and the people who are lucky enough to have the producers actually listen to them singing.
Yeah, I get it. Those early rounds can feel pretty random. It's like if you don't catch the right attention or wear something outrageous, your chances drop. It's not really about talent sometimes. Just luck and how you stand out. It's tough when you put yourself out there, and it feels more like a show than an audition.
My favorite reality show, Big Brother, is under scrutiny constantly for being rigged or manipulated. But many people who say they know producers ask them what is real and what is not. And as it turns out, BB is one of the most unriggable shows that are outside of competitions. The fact that fans watch live feeds 24/7 and have the ability to go back and watch means that producers have to be super careful if they even want to attempt to manipulate contestants. But that doesn't say they don't feed lines to HGs in the diary room, or they are purposefully only putting certain people's chips in a randomized bag for competitions and rigging competitions entirely. Edit. Although I have not been on this show, I have watched for years and have done tons of research into it. I would love to be on the show one day.
I've watched Big Brother for a long time too. It's interesting how people think it's all fake. The live feeds really change the game. You see what's happening all the time, so any manipulation has to be super careful. The diary room parts feel scripted sometimes, and you can tell producers push certain narratives. I'd love to be on the show too. Just hanging out with people and trying to game them sounds fun.
Not exactly a reality show, but most game shows have a per-episode prize budget and have methods in place to put the brakes on if someone starts winning too much. Too many winners on prizes, right? The producers start breaking out games like Lucky 7, and that's too much that have very low win percentages. Your bankroll too high on Wheel of Fortune? Your bonus round puzzle will be something like Oak Bureau or Choir Practice.
It's interesting how game shows work behind the scenes. I remember a friend who was obsessed with The Price is Right. He would watch it every day and try to guess prizes. One time, he even calculated the odds of winning based on past episodes. He figured out which games were more likely to lead to losses. Kind of funny how serious he took it, but I guess that's just how some people view life.
As a video editor, I can safely say it would be nearly impossible to make an entertaining reality show that wasn't at least a little fake. There's very little budget and very little turnaround time, so I'm not going to have time to sift through 1,000 hours of unscripted BS to create a convincing narrative. I've done that before. It's called making a documentary, and even a 30-minute short doc takes months to edit properly. Most reality TV is nothing more than loosely scripted TV, with extra shots to allow for some spontaneity, and that is the only way to do it that I know of without. Releasing 2 to 3 episodes per year B, budgeting for an army of scripties / assistant editors / on-the-fly writers. Think The Truman Show. C, being more of a talk show / game show / reality hybrid.
I get what you mean. Editing reality shows is a grind. I used to help a friend with one, and it was all about finding that balance. We had so much footage, but you really had to create a story from bits and pieces. It's funny how the real moments are often overshadowed by the scripted bits. If you don't keep it interesting, what's the point, right? It's a whole process for sure.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.